It didn't start with anger or shouting. It started with how quiet everything felt. Not peaceful quiet. Just empty. The kind where you're waiting for something to land and it never does. I remember sitting next to him and thinking, I should feel calmer than this. Instead, my chest felt tight, like I was holding my breath for no reason. I keep wondering if I imagined the problem, if I made something small into something heavy, because on the surface nothing was wrong. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't careless. He showed up. He stayed. And yet I was always second-guessing myself, asking whether it was fair to feel lonely when I wasn't being mistreated. I didn't know how to name what I was missing. I just knew I was tired. Tired of guessing what he felt. Tired of explaining myself into silence. Tired of feeling like asking for more made me needy or dramatic. I kept thinking maybe this is just what long relationships settle into. Maybe the discomfort was mine to manage. We met through mutual friends at a birthday dinner that wasn't supposed to matter. A loud table, mismatched chairs, too many conversations happening at once. He sat across from me and barely spoke. I remember noticing that he listened. Not the kind of listening that waits for its turn, but the quiet kind. When we left, he walked with me to my car and asked one thoughtful question. Nothing impressive. Felt easy. Familiar even though it wasn't. After that, we kept running into each other. Coffee shops, group hangouts, grocery aisles. It started to feel natural to look for him without admitting that I was. He didn't rush anything. He didn't push. And somehow that made me trust him faster than anyone else I'd known. What bonded us wasn't excitement. It was calm. He made space. When I talked, he didn't interrupt. When I rambled, he didn't correct me. I felt grounded around him, like I didn't have to perform to be chosen. We slipped into routines quickly. Morning coffee exactly the way we both liked it. Grocery trips that turned into inside jokes about which cereal was secretly elite. Little habits that felt like proof we were building something solid. I told myself this was what safety felt like. The first crack was so small I almost missed it. I would ask how he was really doing and he'd smile and say he was fine. Not defensively. Just flat. If I pushed gently, he'd shrug. Nothing worth talking about. I told myself he was private. That not everyone processed things out loud. That it was respectful even to not dump emotions everywhere. So I filled the silence for him. I'd offer explanations he could choose from. Maybe work was stressful. Maybe he was tired. Maybe I was overthinking. He'd nod sometimes, like one of my guesses landed close enough. And that felt like connection even though it wasn't. Somewhere along the way, the conversations that mattered started getting postponed. Let's talk later. Not tonight. I'm too drained right now. I believed him every time. I told myself timing mattered, that good relationships waited for the right moment. The problem was the right moment never came. I started editing myself. Trimming my thoughts before they left my mouth. If something bothered me, I'd weigh it first. Is this worth disrupting the calm? Most of the time the answer was no. I learned how to swallow feelings quickly. I learned how to smile through discomfort. I learned how to keep the peace by slowly disappearing from it. There were moments that should have brought us closer. Quiet evenings on the couch. Long drives with nothing but time. Even arguments that opened the door to honesty. But instead they ended with silence. He'd go still, not angry, not cold, just unreachable. And I'd feel the space between us widen, even though we were sitting inches apart. The loneliness surprised me. I'd felt alone before, actually alone, and it hadn't felt like this. This was sharper. Being next to someone who didn't meet you emotionally makes you question your own reality. I remember thinking I would feel less invisible if I were by myself. Once I cried. Not dramatically. Just quietly, the kind that slips out when you're exhausted. He looked at me, concerned but distant, and said everything was fine. Not dismissively. Comfortingly. Like he was trying to calm a child. And something in me sank. Because I realized he believed it. Or needed to. By the time it felt routine, I noticed I was rehearsing conversations in my head. Long, careful explanations of what I felt, how I'd say it without accusing him, how I'd make it easy to hear. And then I'd stop halfway through because I already knew how it would end. With him listening politely. With him saying he didn't realize I felt that way. With him saying things were okay. The turning point wasn't a fight. It was quieter than that. I realized he didn't really know me anymore. Not the current version of me. Not the one who had been bending and shrinking and waiting. And worse, he hadn't tried to know me. He assumed that because I was still there, because things weren't loud, nothing was wrong. That realization hurt more than any argument could have. It made everything before it reframe itself. The safety I thought I felt. The calm I trusted. The silence I defended. I started wondering if I'd mistaken emotional absence for loyalty. If quiet had just felt safer than the truth. I stayed longer than I should have. Part of me thought leaving would be unfair. How do you explain that someone didn't do anything wrong? They just didn't do anything at all. I was afraid of sounding ungrateful. Afraid of starting over. Afraid that maybe this was the best version of love I'd get, steady, present, but hollow. And here's the contradiction I can't escape. I defended the relationship because it was calm, while feeling erased by that same calm. I told myself I was lucky while grieving something I couldn't point to. I wondered if I was naming the problem too late, or if I'd known it all along and just didn't want to see it. I still don't know if silence can ever feel like love again. I don't know if emotional distance counts as betrayal when there's no affair, no secret life, no obvious wrongdoing. I only know how it felt to sit in a marriage that looked peaceful and feel unbearably alone inside it. If you've lived something like this, you might see it differently than someone who hasn't. Some people call this stability. Others call it neglect. I'm still somewhere in between, holding the question instead of the answer. What would you do if this were you?